Most people think mental toughness is something you're born with. They look at calm, disciplined people and assume they've always been that way, that they're built differently, stronger, more resilient. But the truth is quieter, less glamorous, and far more uncomfortable. Mental toughness is built slowly, in ordinary moments, when no one is watching and nothing feels heroic. I didn't always understand that. For a long time, I was someone who consumed motivation without changing. I read books, watched videos, saved quotes. Yet under pressure, I still reacted emotionally. I still avoided difficult tasks. I still quit when things felt heavy. It wasn't a lack of information, it was a lack of inner training. The shift didn't come from a sudden breakthrough. It came from repetition, from listening to the same ideas again and again. Not when I felt inspired, but when I felt tired, frustrated, and distracted. Audiobooks became part of my daily environment, on walks, in the car, during quiet moments when my mind wanted to escape. Slowly, something changed. My reactions softened. My focus improved. My tolerance for discomfort grew. I saw the same pattern in people around me. A friend who used to spiral under stress began responding with calm. A colleague who struggled with consistency became quietly disciplined. None of them announced a transformation. They didn't post about it. They simply showed up differently. More grounded, more controlled, more resilient. And when I asked what changed, the answer was rarely dramatic. They had been feeding their minds better every single day. This is what most people misunderstand about growth. And it doesn't feel powerful while it's happening. It feels repetitive, boring, sometimes pointless. But that's exactly where mental toughness is forged. Not in moments of motivation, but in moments of resistance. Not when life is easy, but when your mind wants to quit and you choose to stay. Real mental strength isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need validation. It shows up as patience when you're tested, discipline when you're tired, and clarity when everything feels chaotic. Over time, these small internal choices reshape how you see yourself, and more importantly, what you believe you're capable of handling. This audiobook isn't here to hype you up or promise overnight change. It's here to offer something more valuable, a way to train your inner world, to build discipline without aggression, focus without obsession, strength without losing your humanity. The lessons you're about to hear are simple, but they are not easy. They ask for consistency, they ask for honesty, and they ask you to show up even when no one is applauding. Over the next chapters, you'll hear how mental toughness is built through silence, repetition, and daily choice. You'll hear real examples of how these ideas have been applied by ordinary people facing ordinary struggles. And more importantly, you'll see how you can apply them in your own life, starting exactly where you are. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to strengthen your mind, one decision at a time, slowly and deliberately. And if you know someone in your life who feels overwhelmed, unfocused, or stuck in cycles they can't seem to break, share this video with them. It might be exactly what they need to hear to begin improving their life. Chapter 1. Why mental toughness is built in silence, not motivation. Most people are chasing motivation. They wait for the right feeling, the right mood, the right burst of energy before they act. They scroll, they watch, they listen to inspiring words, hoping something will finally click. And when that feeling fades, as it always does, they assume something is wrong with them. They think they're lazy, broken, or simply not strong enough. But mental toughness is not built in those loud, emotional spikes of motivation. It's built in silence, in repetition, in the moments when nothing feels exciting and no one is watching. I learned this the hard way. There was a time when I knew all the right ideas. I could talk about discipline, focus, and growth. I had listened to countless motivational talks, and I could quote powerful lines about strength and resilience. But when pressure showed up in real life, I still cracked. I reacted emotionally. I avoided discomfort. I looked for excuses instead of solutions. The problem wasn't knowledge. It was training. Motivation made me feel good, but it didn't make me reliable. It gave me emotional highs without building inner structure. And when life stopped cooperating, when stress, boredom, or fear appeared, motivation disappeared, leaving nothing solid behind. That's when I started noticing a different pattern in people who were genuinely strong. I had a friend who never talked about self-improvement. He didn't post quotes, he didn't hype himself up. But no matter what happened, missed deadlines, personal problems, unexpected setbacks, he stayed steady, calm, focused. He didn't complain, and he didn't collapse. He just kept moving forward. One day I asked him how he stayed so grounded. His answer surprised me. He didn't mention motivation or confidence. He said, "I listen to the same things every day, even when I don't feel like it." That was it. No drama, no secret formula. He had built his mental toughness quietly, through repetition, through exposure, through discipline that didn't depend on emotion. This is what most people don't understand. Motivation is reactive. Silence is proactive. Motivation responds to how you feel. Silence shapes how you think. When you listen to the right audiobooks consistently, especially when you're tired, distracted, or unmotivated, you're training your mind to stay engaged without excitement. You're teaching yourself to show up without emotional rewards. That's where real strength begins. Mental toughness is not about pushing harder. It's about staying present when your mind wants to escape. Another example comes from someone very close to me. This person struggled with consistency for years. They would start strong, then fade. Every new plan felt promising, and every failure felt personal. What changed wasn't a new goal. It was a new habit. They replaced background noise, music, social media, random videos with audiobooks focused on discipline and emotional control. At first, nothing dramatic happened. No sudden clarity, no surge of confidence. But after a few weeks, their reactions softened. They paused before responding. They stopped overthinking small problems. They became less reactive and more deliberate. The audiobook wasn't motivating them, it was conditioning them. That's the difference. Motivation says, "Do this because you feel inspired." Mental toughness says, "Do this because it's who you are becoming." Silence plays a critical role here. When you listen without multitasking for excitement, without chasing novelty, you create space. In that space, ideas sink deeper. They stop being concepts and start becoming instincts. Strong people are not constantly energized. They are trained. They don't rely on hype. They rely on habits. And one of the most effective habits for building mental toughness is controlled mental input. What you feed your mind daily shapes how you respond under pressure. Think about it. Your reactions don't appear out of nowhere. They come from patterns you've practiced, consciously or unconsciously. If your mind is constantly fed distraction, comparison, and emotional stimulation, it will default to chaos under stress. But if your mind is fed calm, structured thinking, and grounded principles, it will default to stability. Audiobooks, when used correctly, become a form of silent training. Not something you consume once, something you return to. You don't listen to build excitement, you listen to build familiarity. The same way athletes drill basics until they become automatic, you expose your mind the same core principles until they shape your inner dialogue. This is why repetition matters more than novelty. Most people abandon ideas too early. They listen once, feel smarter, then move on. But mental toughness doesn't come from understanding something once. It comes from hearing it when you're stressed, when you're bored, when you're tempted to quit. That's when the real work happens. Silence strips away illusion. It reveals whether you can stay with a thought without entertainment, whether you can sit with discomfort without distraction, whether you can continue without applause. That's why growth feels boring at first, and that's why most people quit. But the ones who stay, the ones who keep listening quietly, consistently, develop something rare. They become internally stable, less reactive, more resilient. Not because life got easier, but because their minds got stronger. Mental toughness isn't built by doing more. It's built by doing the same right things, even when they feel insignificant. If you want to begin applying this today, start small. Choose one audiobook that aligns with discipline, focus, or emotional control. Don't jump between 10. Choose one. Listen to it during ordinary moments. Walking, driving, cleaning. Especially when you don't feel like it. Don't analyze. Don't judge progress. Just show up. Over time, you'll notice subtle changes. You'll pause before reacting. You'll feel less urgency to escape discomfort. You'll become steadier under pressure, and one day, without realizing when it happened, you'll notice that you're no longer dependent on motivation. You'll be dependent on something stronger. Discipline, and that is where unbreakable mental toughness begins. Chapter 2. Discipline is listening. When you don't feel like it. Discipline is often misunderstood. Most people imagine it as intensity, force, or control. They picture rigid schedules, harsh self-talk, or extreme routines. But real discipline is quieter than that. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to feel powerful. In fact, most of the time, it feels uncomfortable, inconvenient, and almost boring. Discipline is not doing something when you feel motivated. Discipline is doing it when you don't. I used to believe I was disciplined because I could start things. I could make plans. I could get excited about change. But my discipline collapsed the moment my emotions shifted. If I felt tired, distracted, or discouraged, I would postpone. I would tell myself I'd do it later, when I felt better. Later almost never came. It's when I realized something important. My actions were being controlled by my feelings. And as long as that was true, I wasn't disciplined. I was emotionally obedient. The turning point came during a period when everything felt heavy. Work pressure, mental fatigue, a constant sense of being behind. Motivation was gone. I didn't feel inspired. I didn't feel strong. I barely felt functional. But instead of trying to force motivation back, I made one simple decision. I would keep listening. Not because I wanted to, because I had decided to. I pressed play on the same audiobook I had been listening to for weeks. There was nothing new in it anymore. No excitement, no spark, just familiar ideas about discipline, emotional control, and responsibility. And honestly, part of me resisted. My mind said, "What's the point? You already know this." But I listened anyway. That moment taught me more about discipline than any quote or rule ever had. Discipline is not about how something makes you feel. It's about honoring a decision after the feeling changes. Most people quit right there, not because the habit is hard, but because it stops rewarding them emotionally. The novelty fades, the excitement disappears, and without that emotional payoff, they assume the habit has lost its value. But discipline begins exactly where emotional reward ends. I saw this clearly in someone I worked with. They struggled deeply with consistency. They were talented, capable, and intelligent, but unreliable. Some weeks they were locked in, focused, and productive. Other weeks they disappeared mentally. Deadlines slipped. Energy dropped. Confidence followed. One day, they shared something small but revealing. They had started listening to audiobooks every morning during their commute. Not exciting ones, not motivational hype. Calm, repetitive content about self-control, focus, and discipline. At first, they skipped days. Then they made one rule. No matter how they felt, they would listen for at least 10 minutes. That rule changed everything. 10 minutes was small enough to feel manageable, but firm enough to remove negotiation. No waiting to feel ready, no debating mood, just listening. After a few weeks, something shifted. They weren't suddenly happier or more energetic, but they were steadier, less reactive, more composed when things went wrong. Their discipline didn't look dramatic, it looked reliable. That's the real signature of discipline. It's not intensity, it's consistency under low energy. Discipline is what keeps you anchored when your mind is restless and your emotions are unstable. And audiobooks, when used correctly, are one of the most effective tools for training that anchor. Here's why. Listening requires very little effort, but a lot of honesty. You can't pretend you're too busy. You can't hide behind complexity. Either you show up or you don't. And when you choose to listen on days you don't feel like it, you're sending a powerful message to yourself. My actions are not controlled by my emotions. That message rewires how you see yourself. Most people don't lack willpower. They lack trust in themselves. They don't trust that they'll follow through when things get uncomfortable. And every time they quit based on feeling, that distrust grows stronger. Discipline repairs that trust. And each time you listen when you don't feel like it, you reinforce a new identity, someone who keeps their word to themselves. And this identity matters far more than motivation ever will. Motivation comes and goes. Identity stays. Another important lesson discipline teaches is patience with boredom. When you listen to the same audiobook repeatedly without novelty, your mind gets restless. It wants stimulation. It wants something new. That restlessness is not a problem. It's part of the training. Mental toughness grows when you stop needing constant stimulation to stay engaged. Most people escape boredom immediately. They reach for their phone. They change tasks. They look for distraction. But boredom is where discipline is sharpened. When you stay with a habit despite boredom, you build tolerance, you build focus, you build control. That's why disciplined people appear calm. They are not calm because life is easy. They are calm because they are no longer ruled by internal discomfort. Listening when you don't feel like it trains exactly that skill. It teaches you to sit with resistance instead of running from it, to continue without emotional permission, to move forward without internal applause. This is also why discipline feels lonely at times. There's no one cheering you on during quiet repetition, no immediate reward, no visible progress, just you showing up again. But that loneliness is temporary. What it produces is permanent. Over time, discipline compounds into confidence. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself. If you want to apply this in your own life, simplify the process. Don't aim for long sessions. Don't aim for perfect focus. Aim for presence. Set a minimum standard, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Whatever feels small enough to remove excuses, but firm enough to require commitment. Listen on good days. Listen on bad days. Especially listen on the days you feel resistance. Don't judge yourself for distraction. Don't force understanding. Let the words pass through you. Let repetition do its work. Discipline is not about effort. It's about agreement. An agreement you make with yourself and honor consistently. And the more often you honor it, the less you depend on motivation. Eventually, something changes. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" You start asking, "Is this what I do?" That's the shift from emotional living to disciplined living. And that shift is one of the strongest foundations of unbreakable mental toughness. Because when discipline replaces emotion as the driver of your actions, your life becomes steadier, calmer, and far more resilient no matter how you feel on any given day. Chapter 3. Mental toughness is staying calm under pressure. Most people believe pressure reveals who you are. They say that when stress rises, your true nature comes out. In reality, pressure doesn't reveal character as much as it reveals training. When life tightens, you don't rise to your ideals, you fall back to your habits. And for many people, that habit is emotional reaction. I used to think my reactions were justified. If I felt disrespected, I reacted. If something went wrong, I complained. If plans collapsed, my mood collapsed with them. I told myself this was honesty, that I was just expressing how I felt. But over time, I noticed something uncomfortable. Every emotional reaction made me feel weaker, not stronger. I wasn't releasing pressure, I was feeding it. Mental toughness, I eventually learned, is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to experience emotion without surrendering control. This lesson became real for me through someone I worked closely with. Under normal conditions, they were thoughtful and competent. But the moment pressure appeared, tight deadlines, critical feedback, unexpected changes, they shifted. Their voice tightened. Their body language closed. Decisions became rushed and defensive. Everyone around them felt it. Then, slowly, something changed. They didn't announce it. They didn't explain it. But over a few months, their presence transformed. Deadlines were still intense. Feedback was still sharp. But their reactions were different. Calmer, slower, more deliberate. Instead of reacting immediately, they paused. Instead of defending themselves, they listened. Instead of escalating tension, they absorbed it. When I finally asked what had changed, their answer was simple. They had been listening daily to audiobooks centered on emotional control and composure, not to relax, but to retrain how they responded when pressure hit. They described it like this. When stress comes now, it feels familiar. I've already practiced staying calm in my head. That's the key. Calm under pressure is not a personality trait, it's a rehearsed response. Most people only practice calm when life is calm. Then they're surprised when it disappears under stress. But mental toughness is built by rehearsing composure before you need it. Audiobooks play a powerful role here because they allow you to practice calm in neutral moments. When you listen to steady, grounded ideas repeatedly, your nervous system learns a different baseline, but your internal dialogue slows down. Your tolerance for discomfort expands. Over time, pressure stops feeling like an emergency and starts feeling like a signal. Another personal example stands out clearly. A close friend of mine used to be extremely reactive. Small problems felt huge. Delays felt personal. Disagreements turned into emotional battles. They weren't weak or incapable. They were overwhelmed by their own reactions. They started listening to audiobooks during evening walks, specifically choosing content about emotional discipline and self-mastery. At first, they admitted it felt pointless. The advice sounded obvious. Pause. Breathe. Don't react. They had heard it before, but hearing it once is not the same as hearing it daily. After several weeks, something subtle shifted. When an argument began, they noticed the urge to react, but didn't immediately act on it. That pause, even if it lasted only a few seconds, changed the entire outcome. Conversations softened. Decisions improved. Regret decreased. What changed wasn't the situation. What changed was the space between stimulus and response. That space is where mental toughness lives. Most people live without that space. Emotion hits and action follows immediately. Anger becomes words. Fear becomes avoidance. Stress becomes impulsive decisions. And later, regret arrives. Mental toughness interrupts that chain. It allows you to feel the emotion without letting it choose your behavior. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings. Suppression creates tension. Control creates clarity. There is a critical difference. Suppression says, I shouldn't feel this. Control says, I feel this, and I choose my response. Audiobooks train this distinction through repetition. When you consistently hear language that emphasizes awareness, pause, and choice, your mind begins to adopt those patterns. Under pressure, your thoughts slow down just enough to create options, and options are power. One of the most damaging myths about calmness is that it's passive or weak. In reality, calmness under pressure is a strategic advantage. When others are emotional, the calm person sees clearly. When others rush, the calm person chooses wisely. When others escalate, the calm person stabilizes the situation. That stability is felt by everyone around you. Think about the people you trust most in difficult moments. They're rarely the loudest or most emotional. They're the ones who remain grounded when things go wrong. Their calm creates safety. Their presence lowers chaos. This kind of presence doesn't come from talent. It comes from training. And training doesn't require extreme circumstances. It requires consistency. Listening daily to audiobooks that reinforce emotional control is like rehearsing calm in advance. You're not waiting for a crisis to learn composure. You're preparing for it quietly. Pressure doesn't disappear. Life will always present challenges, deadlines, conflict, uncertainty, loss. Mental toughness doesn't eliminate these experiences. It changes how you move through them. The goal is not to feel less, it's to react less. And that difference changes everything. So if you want to begin applying this immediately, start by noticing your internal speed. When something triggers you, your mind accelerates, thoughts stack, emotion tightens, your body reacts. That's the moment to pause, not to solve, not to explain, not to defend. Pause. Even a few seconds of space weakens the grip of emotion, and when you pair that pause with daily exposure to calm, disciplined thinking through audiobooks, the pause becomes natural instead of forced. Over time, your default response shifts. You no longer explode or withdraw. You stay, you observe, you choose. That's mental toughness. It's not dramatic. It doesn't feel heroic, but it's powerful. Because the person who can stay calm under pressure is the person who stays in control of their life, their decisions, us and their direction, no matter what emotions try to pull them away. Chapter 4. Focus is a muscle. You either train or lose. Focus used to be something I took for granted. I assumed it was a natural ability, something you either had or didn't. Some people could concentrate for hours, while others, like me, felt constantly pulled in 100 directions. Notifications, thoughts, worries, unfinished tasks. My attention was always scattered, and I blamed the world for it. What I didn't realize at the time was this: focus is not a personality trait, it's a muscle. And like any muscle, it grows with training and weakens with neglect. I noticed the difference when I compared two types of days. On days filled with random content, short videos, endless scrolling, background noise, I felt mentally exhausted without having done anything meaningful. My thoughts jumped from one thing to another, and even simple tasks felt heavy. On days when my mental input was more controlled, when I spent time listening to long-form audiobooks, my mind felt calmer, steadier, and more capable of staying with a single task. The environment hadn't changed. My training had. One of the clearest examples came from someone in my family. They struggled deeply with concentration. Reading was difficult. Conversations drifted. Work took twice as long as it should have. They often described their mind as never shutting up. At first, they tried forcing focus, turning off devices, setting strict rules. But it only created frustration. What worked was surprisingly simple: They replaced passive noise with intentional listening. Instead of music or random media, they listened to the same audiobook every day during walks and commutes. There was no pressure to memorize or analyze, just listening. At first, their mind wandered constantly. They missed parts. They got bored. They felt restless. But they kept going. After a few weeks, they noticed something subtle. They could stay with conversations longer. Tasks felt less overwhelming. Their mind didn't jump as quickly. Focus hadn't suddenly appeared. It had been trained. This is how focus actually works. Every time you resist the urge to switch, scroll, or distract yourself, you strengthen your ability to stay present. Every time you expose your mind to long, uninterrupted streams of thought, you teach it endurance. Audiobooks, especially when listened to repeatedly, create exactly this kind of mental endurance. Most people underestimate how fragmented their attention has become. They think they have a motivation problem or a discipline problem, when in reality, they have an attention problem. Their mind is so used to constant stimulation that silence feels uncomfortable and sustained focus feels impossible. But discomfort is not a sign of inability. It's a sign of weakness being trained. Just like sore muscles after exercise, mental restlessness means your focus muscle is being challenged. I saw this clearly in a colleague who was brilliant but inconsistent. They could produce excellent work, but only in short bursts. Deep work felt exhausting. They blamed pressure, workload, and stress. Then they made one change. They started listening to audiobooks on focus and discipline every morning before work. Not as motivation, but as preparation. So they described it as tuning their mind. Instead of starting the day reactive, they started grounded. Over time, their ability to stay with tasks improved. Distractions didn't disappear, but their pull weakened. Focus became something they could access more reliably. Focus is not about eliminating distraction. It's about strengthening resistance, and that resistance is built gradually. Audiobooks work because they sit between effort and ease. They require attention, but not strain. They engage the mind without overwhelming it. When you listen consistently, especially to the same content, your brain stops chasing novelty and starts settling into depth. This is why repetition matters again. Listening to many different audiobooks once may feel productive, but it rarely trains focus. Listening to the same audiobook repeatedly builds familiarity, and familiarity reduces cognitive load. With less effort spent processing novelty, more attention is available for staying present. That's when focus becomes natural. Another important aspect of focus is emotional regulation. When emotions are unstable, focus collapses. Anxiety pulls attention into the future. Regret pulls it into the past. Audiobooks that emphasize calm, structure, and control help stabilize emotional noise, making focus possible again. This is mental toughness in a quieter form. You don't need extreme concentration. You need sustained attention, the ability to stay with one thing slightly longer than your mind wants to. That ability compounds. 10 minutes of focused listening becomes 15. 15 becomes 30. And eventually, you find yourself able to sit with tasks that once felt unbearable. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens through daily exposure. If you want to apply this in your own life, start by changing what you feed your mind during low-effort moments. Commutes, walks, chores. These moments shape your baseline attention more than you realize. Replace random input with intentional listening. Choose audiobooks that are calm, structured, and aligned with discipline and self-mastery. Avoid content that constantly spikes emotion. You're not looking for excitement, you're training endurance. When your mind wanders, don't get frustrated. Wandering is part of the process. Each time you bring your attention back, you strengthen the muscle. Over time, you'll notice a shift. Your mind will feel less scattered. You'll feel more present. Tasks will feel clearer. Decisions will feel simpler. And perhaps most importantly, you'll stop feeling mentally exhausted all the time. Focus, once trained, becomes a form of quiet power. It allows you to stay with discomfort, to think clearly under pressure, to direct your energy instead of leaking it everywhere. In a world designed to fragment your attention, choosing to train focus is an act of strength. And like all strength, it's built daily, quietly, deliberately, and without applause. Chapter 5. Growth happens. When you keep showing up, most people believe growth should feel obvious. They expect clear signs, dramatic breakthroughs, and moments where everything suddenly makes sense. When those moments don't come, they assume they're not changing. They conclude that the effort isn't working and quietly stop. But real growth almost never announces itself. It happens quietly, in the background, while you're busy living your life, and the only requirement it truly demands is that you keep showing up. I used to underestimate this. I thought growth meant improvement I could feel. If I didn't feel sharper, stronger, or more confident, I assumed nothing was happening. I listened to audiobooks, read ideas, reflected on them, but when my behavior didn't instantly change, I felt disappointed. But what I didn't understand then was that growth doesn't feel like progress while it's forming. It feels like repetition. There was a period when I listened to the same audiobook for weeks. I knew the structure. I recognized the phrases. I could almost predict what was coming next, and part of me thought, I've outgrown this. I need something new. But I stayed with it. Not because it was exciting, because it was familiar. And familiarity turned out to be the point. I noticed the change later, not during listening, but during life. In moments that used to trigger frustration, I was calmer. When plans fell apart, I adapted faster. When work became monotonous, I stayed present instead of escaping. None of these changes felt dramatic. They felt natural, as if this had always been who I was. That's how growth actually works. It doesn't feel like adding something new. It feels like removing friction. I saw this clearly in a close friend who struggled with self-doubt. They were intelligent and capable, but constantly questioned themselves. Every mistake became evidence of failure. Every delay felt like proof they weren't good enough. They tried reading books, attending workshops, and setting goals, but nothing seemed to stick. Then they simplified everything. They chose one audiobook focused on self-mastery and discipline. Just one. And they committed to listening to it every day, even if only for a few minutes. No pressure to understand everything. No pressure to change immediately. Weeks passed. Nothing obvious happened. Months passed. Something subtle shifted. They stopped apologizing for existing. They hesitated less before making decisions. They recovered faster from mistakes. When I pointed it out, they were surprised. They hadn't noticed the change themselves. That's the danger of expecting growth to feel loud. You miss it while it's happening. Growth is cumulative. Each time you show up, you add a small layer of reinforcement. Each repetition strengthens the same pathways. Over time, these layers become your default. Audiobooks accelerate this process because they allow you to keep showing up even on low-energy days. You don't need to perform. You don't need to produce. You just need to listen. And listening, repeated over time, reshapes how you think. One of the biggest mistakes people make is constantly switching inputs. New book, new idea, new method, new philosophy. They're always starting over, which means they're never letting anything settle. But growth requires staying long enough for ideas to move from conscious thought into unconscious behavior. That only happens through repetition. Another example comes from a colleague who was deeply frustrated with their lack of progress. They worked hard but felt stagnant. Every few weeks, they tried something new. New routines, new productivity systems, new content. Nothing lasted. Eventually, they stopped chasing novelty and committed to consistency instead. They picked one audiobook and listened to it daily during their commute. Same content, same message, over and over. At first, they complained it was boring. Later, they stopped noticing it. And eventually, they realized they were acting differently without trying. Less procrastination, clearer priorities, more follow-through. Growth didn't arrive as motivation, it arrived as alignment. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to grow and focus on showing up, growth happens. Showing up trains patience, it trains humility, it teaches you to trust processes instead of chasing results. And this trust is essential for mental toughness. Mentally tough people don't need constant proof that they're improving. They understand that consistency is proof enough. They know that missing a day occasionally doesn't erase progress, but quitting entirely does. So they return, again and again. Growth also requires tolerance for uncertainty. When you keep showing up without visible results, your mind starts to doubt. It asks, is this working? That question is natural, but answering it with action, by continuing anyway, is what builds strength. Audiobooks support this because they normalize patience, the steady voice, the repeated themes, the calm reinforcement. All of it sends a message. Stay with it. Over time, that message becomes internal. If you want to apply this principle, simplify your expectations. Don't look for signs of change during the process. Look for commitment. Ask yourself, did I listen today? Did I show up again? Did I keep the agreement with myself? Those questions matter more than how you feel. Choose one audiobook that speaks to discipline, focus, or emotional strength, and commit to it for a set period, 30 days, 60 days. Don't rush, don't evaluate, just listen. Let the ideas become familiar. Let them fade into the background of your thoughts. That's where they begin to influence behavior. Growth doesn't require intensity. It requires presence, and presence, repeated daily, reshapes identity. One day, you'll notice that you handle situations differently, that you don't overreact the way you used to, that you stay with difficult tasks longer, that you trust yourself more, and you may not remember exactly when the change happened. That's because growth didn't arrive in a moment. It arrived through showing up. Quietly, consistently, without celebration. And that is the kind of growth that lasts. Chapter 6. Mental toughness is built through repetition. Most people underestimate repetition. They associate it with boredom, stagnation, or lack of progress. If something feels familiar, they assume it's no longer useful. They chase novelty, believing new information equals growth. But mental toughness doesn't come from constantly learning new ideas. It comes from repeatedly living with the right ones. Repetition is how thoughts become instincts. I didn't understand this at first. I believed that once I understood an idea, I could move on. I thought awareness was enough. But awareness fades under pressure. When stress rises, the mind doesn't reach for what it understands. It reaches for what it has practiced. That realization changed how I approached audiobooks. Instead of collecting titles, I began returning to the same one, again and again. At first, it felt unnecessary. I already knew the message. I could predict the structure. I could almost recite parts of it, but that familiarity turned out to be exactly what rewired my responses. I noticed it during moments of friction. When something went wrong, my internal voice sounded different, calmer, more deliberate. The audiobook wasn't in my head word for word, but its tone was, its rhythm, its way of framing challenges. That's repetition at work. I saw an even clearer example in a close friend who struggled with emotional swings. Some days they were confident and focused. Other days they were overwhelmed and reactive. Their mindset depended entirely on circumstances. They wanted stability, but everything felt unpredictable. And they made one decision that seemed almost too simple. They chose one audiobook and listened to it every single day for 3 months. Not multiple audiobooks, not a playlist. One voice, one message. At first, they complained it felt monotonous, but they stayed with it. And something remarkable happened. Their emotional range narrowed. Not in a negative way, but in a stabilizing way. Highs were less frantic, lows were less paralyzing. They became more even, more grounded. When I asked them how they felt different, they said something that stuck with me. It feels like my mind has a default setting now. That's what repetition creates, a default. Mental toughness is not about having the right response once. It's about having the right response automatically. And automatic responses are built through repetition. This is why athletes drill basics, why musicians practice scales, why pilots train for emergencies repeatedly. In high-pressure situations, there is no time to think. You rely on what has been repeated enough to become reflex. Life works the same way. When emotions surge, when stress tightens, when uncertainty appears, you don't rise to your intentions. You fall back to your conditioning. Audiobooks, used repeatedly, become a form of conditioning. Not loud conditioning, not forceful, quiet, steady, and persistent. Every time you listen to the same principles, you reinforce the same neural pathways. You're teaching your brain what to prioritize, what to slow down, what to ignore. Over time, those pathways strengthen and alternatives weaken. This is why repetition feels boring before it feels powerful. The mind craves novelty because novelty stimulates dopamine. Repetition doesn't, but dopamine is not discipline, and stimulation is not strength. Mental toughness requires delayed rewards. Another person I worked with experienced this firsthand. They were constantly overwhelmed, not because their workload was extreme, but because their reactions were. Every task felt urgent. Every mistake felt catastrophic. Their mind jumped from one worry to another. They began listening to the same audiobook during quiet moments, especially during times when their mind wanted distraction. At first, they barely paid attention. Then slowly, they noticed something unusual. Their thoughts slowed down. They stopped catastrophizing. They began prioritizing more clearly. The content wasn't new, the repetition was. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates safety. Safety allows the nervous system to calm down. And a calm nervous system is the foundation of mental toughness. This is also why repetition builds confidence. Not confidence based on achievement, but confidence based on predictability. You know how you'll respond because you've practiced it. That kind of confidence doesn't disappear under pressure. Many people avoid repetition because they confuse it with stagnation. But repetition is not standing still. It's deepening. Each time you return to the same idea, you hear it differently. Not because the idea changes, but because you do. Your life context shifts. Your challenges evolve. The same words land in new ways. That's when understanding turns into embodiment. If you want to apply this, simplify your approach. Choose one audiobook that aligns with discipline, emotional control, or mental resilience. Commit to listening to it daily for a set period. 30 days, 60 days, longer if possible. Resist the urge to switch when boredom appears. Boredom is a signal that repetition is working. It means novelty has worn off and training has begun. Listen when you're calm. Listen when you're stressed. Especially listen when you're tempted to skip. Don't aim for insight. Aim for exposure. Over time, you'll notice your internal dialogue changing. Less panic, less resistance, more clarity, more steadiness. These changes won't feel dramatic. They'll feel normal. And that's how you know repetition has done its work. Mental toughness is not built by knowing what to do, but it's built by hearing it so often that doing it becomes natural. Repetition is not exciting, but it is transformative. And for those willing to stay with it, it becomes the quiet foundation of an unbreakable mind. Chapter 7. Strong minds don't seek validation. One of the quiet enemies of mental toughness is the need for validation. Not praise in the obvious sense, but the subtle habit of measuring yourself through other people's reactions. Approval, recognition, reassurance. These things feel harmless, even motivating, but over time, they weaken your inner stability. A mind that depends on validation is a mind that gives away control. I didn't realize how much validation shaped my behavior until I started paying attention to my reactions. When something I did was acknowledged, I felt energized. When it went unnoticed, I felt deflated. When I received criticism, even mild, my mood shifted instantly. I told myself this was normal, that everyone reacts this way, but normal doesn't mean healthy. The more I needed external confirmation, and the less grounded I became internally. My discipline rose and fell with feedback. My confidence fluctuated with opinions, and my sense of direction blurred whenever approval was absent. Mental toughness requires something different. It requires an internal reference point. I saw this clearly in a colleague who worked quietly and consistently. They never talked about their progress. They didn't seek recognition. They didn't explain themselves. And yet, their work was solid, reliable, and respected. When pressure increased, they didn't crumble. When praise was absent, they didn't slow down. When I asked them how they stayed so steady, they said something simple. I stopped needing people to notice. That decision changed everything for them. They shared that earlier in their career. They constantly looked for feedback. So they wanted reassurance that they were doing things right. But this created anxiety. Every silence felt like disapproval. Every delay in response felt personal. Eventually, they began listening to audiobooks focused on self-reliance and inner discipline. Not to feel better, but to reframe how they measured themselves. Over time, their internal dialogue shifted. They stopped asking, "Do they approve?" and started asking, "Did I act according to my standards?" That shift is the foundation of mental toughness. Strong minds don't eliminate the desire for validation overnight. They reduce its influence gradually. They learn to notice the urge without obeying it. Audiobooks help with this because they reinforce internal standards. When you repeatedly hear messages about responsibility, self-respect, and inner control, because you begin to adopt a different metric for success. You stop looking outward first. This doesn't mean you ignore feedback. It means feedback no longer defines you. There's an important distinction here. Validation seeking is not the same as learning. One weakens independence, the other strengthens it. Mentally tough people can listen to criticism without collapsing and accept praise without becoming dependent on it. They remain centered. I saw this change happen in a close friend who used to overshare their progress. Every small achievement went online. Every struggle was explained. They needed people to know what they were doing and why. At first, it felt like accountability, but over time, it became pressure. They admitted something surprising. The more they shared, the less they actually did. The performance replaced the work. Eventually, they stopped broadcasting their efforts. They chose silence. They focused on listening to audiobooks during solo walks and quiet evenings. No one knew what they were working on. And for the first time, they felt free. Without the need to impress, they could move at their own pace. Without external eyes, mistakes felt less threatening. Progress became personal instead of performative. Silence strengthened them. This is a pattern you'll notice among mentally tough people. They do their work quietly. They don't rush to explain themselves. They don't argue for validation. They let consistency speak. Validation seeking creates emotional volatility. Approval creates highs. Disapproval creates lows. Silence creates uncertainty. But when you train yourself to operate without constant feedback, those swings soften. Audiobooks support this transition by giving you a stable internal voice. Instead of seeking reassurance from the outside world, you hear steady reinforcement internally. Over time, that voice becomes familiar, trustworthy. That's when discipline deepens. Another key aspect of releasing validation is learning to be misunderstood. When you stop explaining yourself, some people won't get you. They may question your choices. They may project their expectations onto you. Mental toughness means allowing that discomfort. Not every action needs justification. Not every path needs approval. Strong minds understand that alignment matters more than agreement. If you want to apply this principle, start with one simple shift. Do something meaningful without telling anyone. Listen to your audiobook. Work on your habit. Improve quietly. Notice the urge to share. Notice the desire for acknowledgement. Then let it pass. This isn't suppression, it's redirection. Over time, you'll feel more grounded, less reactive to opinions, more committed to your own standards, and that internal stability will strengthen every other aspect of your mental toughness. Validation feels good, but independence feels solid. And solid minds don't break easily. They don't need applause to continue. They don't need approval to persist. They don't need recognition to grow. They rely on something deeper, their own discipline. Chapter 8. Becoming mentally unbreakable is a daily choice. Most people imagine mental toughness as a destination, a point you reach where life no longer shakes you, where discipline feels effortless, and where challenges stop affecting you. But mental toughness doesn't work that way. It isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you choose again and again, every single day. This realization changed how I approached growth. For a long time, I believed that if I just listened enough, learned enough, or improved enough, I would eventually arrive. I thought there would be a moment when discipline became automatic and inner resistance disappeared. That moment never came. What came instead was something more honest, a series of daily decisions. Some days, those decisions felt easy. Other days, they felt heavy. But the people who become mentally unbreakable are not the ones who feel strong every day. They are the ones who keep choosing their standards even when they feel weak. I saw this clearly in my own life during a period of uncertainty. Nothing was falling apart, but nothing felt stable either. Progress felt slow. Motivation was inconsistent. There were days when skipping felt justified. Days when my mind offered convincing excuses. And on those days, the decision to continue felt almost insignificant. But those insignificant decisions added up. Listening when I didn't feel like it. Returning when I drifted. Choosing structure over impulse. None of these choices felt heroic, but together they built something durable. Mental toughness grows from accumulation, and I saw the same pattern in someone close to me who went through a difficult personal transition. Their routine was disrupted. Their confidence was shaken. Their future felt uncertain. They didn't try to fix everything at once. Instead, they anchored themselves to one daily choice, listening to an audiobook that reinforced discipline and self-trust. That choice became their constant. Some days, they barely paid attention. Other days, the words felt deeply relevant. But regardless of mood, they showed up. Over time, their posture changed, their voice steadied. Their decisions became firmer. Life didn't become easier, but they became harder to break. That's the power of daily choice. Mental toughness doesn't remove struggle. It changes how you carry it. Every day presents options: react or pause, quit or continue, escape or stay present. These decisions don't announce their importance, but they shape identity. The person you become is not defined by your best days. It's defined by the days you didn't feel like trying and did anyway. Audiobooks support this process by acting as reminders rather than solutions. They don't push you forward, they hold you steady. They reinforce your values when emotions try to pull you away. That steadiness matters more than intensity. One of the most overlooked aspects of mental toughness is forgiveness. Not forgiving others, but forgiving yourself. Daily choice includes returning after you slip, listening again after you miss a day, continuing without self-punishment. Unbreakable minds are not rigid. They are resilient. They bend, recover, and return. I watched a friend struggle with perfectionism. Every missed habit felt like failure. Every inconsistency triggered self-criticism. They wanted discipline, but their harshness made it unsustainable. Through consistent listening to audiobooks about resilience and patience, they learned a different approach. Discipline without cruelty. Structure without shame. That shift allowed them to stay in the process longer. Daily choice also means protecting your standards, choosing environments that support focus, choosing inputs that calm rather than agitate, choosing silence over noise. These choices may feel small, but they reduce friction and preserve energy. Mental toughness isn't about fighting yourself. It's about designing your life so strength becomes the default. And that design is built one decision at a time. There will be days when your mind feels loud, days when progress feels invisible, and days when quitting feels logical. On those days, mental toughness isn't about pushing harder. It's about remembering why you started, not the dramatic reasons, the quiet ones. You wanted to be steadier, calmer, more reliable. You wanted to stop being controlled by emotion and circumstance. You wanted a mind that could endure. That desire is honored through daily choice. If you want to apply this principle, simplify your focus. Don't ask, how do I change my life? Ask, what is the one choice I can make today that aligns with the person I want to become? Listen today. Show up today. Choose discipline today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Over time, those daily choices form a pattern. That pattern becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. One day, you'll notice something important. Life still presents challenges. Pressure still appears. Emotions still rise, but they don't overwhelm you the way they used to. You stay grounded. You stay present. You recover faster. You don't feel invincible. You feel stable. And stability is what makes you unbreakable. Mental toughness is not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not rare. It's built quietly by people who keep choosing strength when no one is watching. And that choice, made daily, is what turns ordinary minds into unbreakable ones. As we come to the end of this audiobook, take a moment to reflect on what you've heard. Not the individual words or specific examples, but the deeper pattern that runs through every chapter. Mental toughness is not something dramatic. It's not built in moments of hype or sudden inspiration. It's built quietly through discipline, focus, repetition, and daily choice. We talked about how strength grows in silence, not motivation. How discipline shows up most clearly on the days you don't feel like trying. How calm under pressure is trained, not inherited. How focus is a muscle that either strengthens with use or weakens with neglect. How growth happens when you keep showing up, even when nothing feels different. How repetition rewires your inner world. How letting go of validation frees your energy. And finally, how becoming mentally unbreakable is a choice you make every single day. None of these ideas are complicated, but they are demanding. Not because they require intensity, but because they require consistency. Mental toughness is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more stable within yourself. less reactive, less scattered, more grounded. It's about building a mind that doesn't collapse when life becomes uncomfortable. And the most important thing to remember is this: you don't need to do everything at once. You don't need to change your entire life tomorrow. You just need to practice. Choose one small action. Listen intentionally. Return daily. Stay with the process even when it feels boring, slow, or invisible. Let the ideas sink in gradually. Let repetition do its quiet work. Over time, your reactions will soften. Your focus will sharpen. Your discipline will feel less forced and more natural. This is not about perfection. You will miss days. You will lose focus. You will feel resistance. That doesn't disqualify you. What matters is that you come back again and again. Mental toughness is built by returning. If you truly want to apply what you've heard, treat this audiobook not as something you finished, but as something you live with. Revisit it. Listen again during walks, commutes, or quiet moments. Let it become part of your environment, not just something you consume once. And as you practice, be patient with yourself. Strength takes time. Real change often happens so quietly that you don't notice it until one day you realize you're handling life differently than before. You pause instead of reacting. You stay instead of quitting. You choose discipline instead of comfort. That's progress. Before we part, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for giving your attention to something deeper, slower, and more demanding than noise and distraction. The fact that you stayed until the end already says something about you. It shows a willingness to reflect, to grow, and to strengthen yourself from the inside out. If this audiobook resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you care about. A friend, a family member, or someone you know who feels overwhelmed, unfocused, or stuck. Sometimes, one steady voice at the right moment can change the direction of a person's life. And if you want to continue this journey, stay with us. More audiobooks are coming, each one designed to help you build discipline, clarity, and inner strength without hype or pressure. Until then, remember this: you don't need a louder life. You don't need more motivation. You need a stronger mind. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.